Welcome to episode 5 of Capturing the Intangibles, where today we have a slightly different focus area, this time on creativity and how our special guest believes that we all possess that creative gene, whether we know it or not. Big thanks to my good friend Peter Gagnon for joining us this week, and I think you'll enjoy this feel-good episode. All right, guys, welcome back into the podcast this week. This is most definitely the highlight of my week every week. It's just so fun doing this with you guys. We've got a really special guest this week. Someone that's become a really good friend of mine. I respect him. He's so creative and all these great things. And that kind of is what we're going to talk about today. So kind of a segue in from a previous episode, you've heard us talk a lot about what's the next generation of workforce and what are the things that we might be looking for in employees, specifically in technology, but I think it applies everywhere, right? But I think it centers around you just want creative people. And so we brought in who I consider absolutely the most creative person at Infor and the most creative person I know, and is actually one of the sources of the creative energy of this show, of what we want to do, what we want it to become. But Mr. Peter Gagnon, welcome. How about you introduce yourself real quick?
Thanks, Rick. So, like Rick said, my name is Peter Gagnon, creative director of the video team for Infor. I would challenge Rick on the most creative person that he knows. I think Nunzio is a lot more creative than me.
No, don't tell him that. Don't tell him that.
It's kind of interesting when you said like the future of people being creative in technology. I think that one of the things that makes people extremely creative is the ability to problem solve. So it's kind of a dual thing, is like somebody who's creative, but is able to make those abstract leaps in problem solving. That's what makes somebody the most creative. A little bit about myself. I've been in the film and TV business for close to 24 years. I've worked on everything from TV shows to major motion pictures, and had the absolute honor to work with amazing people from every single industry. And, came to Infor in a very strange way, but I've loved every single minute of it, and been able to meet some incredible technologists, designers, developers, customers, people that are like all thought leaders in their field. And it's been a pretty crazy journey, and been able to travel the world a few times because of Infor. And, like as Massimo was saying, I'm going to give a foreshadowing to his hat, going to Maranello with him and being in a Ferrari. It's been an absolute delight.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Long-winded version of me.
No, I think
I'm
we're
also
all...
a dad. I'm also a dad and a husband. So
that's a different
Awesome.
podcast,
Yep.
man.
oh, sorry. Cheers.
Cheers.
No, I think we're all lucky in that regard of how we've been able to do some pretty incredible things with our work experience. It's unlocked a whole host of doors, and more so than anything, meeting good people like the ones we have here. And we won't maybe dive into this too quickly, Peter, but you and I have had discussions about how we both love the show Ted Lasso, and you got me into it, right? And it's just, I mean, I absolutely love it, but
Has Massimo watched it
No,
yet?
not yet.
I don't know.
have to start.
Have you seen it?
I have to start.
Oh,
Come
my
on,
God.
you lead a whole team. So I was
Josh,
just talking
you got to kick him off the podcast. This was a homework assignment from 4 weeks ago.
Oh my God.
Come on, man.
Oh my God.
Massimo.
Oh my God. Yeah, I have work to do.
So this show, Ted Lasso, I've been gushing about it. I was even gushing about it this morning while we were producing an all-hands call. Just from a human perspective, the way that show is written and the way it's produced, it's just very genuine. It's not like anything else that's on Netflix or Apple TV or Hulu or Amazon. It's just very human and very real, and always positive without being saccharine, right? It's always positive in a way that you're not like, oh, that's so sweet. It's positive in like wow, there is hope for humanity. Wow, people are just people, and people are inherently, just trying to live their lives and be good people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that I love about the show. And it talks a lot about leadership. Rick and I were talking about this before, like just what it means to be a leader, and how a good leader leads without fear, without being critical, without being, and I mean, he's kind of risen to a status, Ted Lasso, Jason Sudeikis' character, to a level of like, man, I don't even think I could do that. Like I couldn't be that just positive all the time.
Mm-hmm. Right, and it's so interesting on that show. Now, of course, it's taken to extremes, right? But this guy knows nothing about football or soccer, right? But he's good at what he does because he can inspire people. He can get people onto a vision or a way of thinking and being that to like believe in yourself. So, anyways, we're gonna go down a deep rabbit hole of why that show is just so.
But Massimo, as a leader, you should be watching that show.
I'll do that. Yeah. I'll do that. And if it is about soccer, is it about Juventus?
No, it's EPL. It's not.
But nobody cares about Juventus anyway.
Okay.
Nobody cares about Italian soccer anyway. I mean, they're all paid off.
Yeah, I will watch it because I do love the leadership style that you were describing, Peter. Working with the teams, working with the same goal, really mentoring and helping people to be succeeding in what they do. Be clear also on the goals. What is the goals and what is the purpose that we have, not having conflicting goals. It's very, very important, when you run an organization. So I'm looking forward to do that. But one thing that actually I have a question for you. You have worked on the film industry. Now you're working in the software industry. What, when you work in the film industry, you will want to portray something, a situation or a character or what do you find difficult or easy to portray in a software world, right? What is that software companies are trying to portray? Is it like in the movie industries or is it totally different?
That's a really good question. From my perspective, I've always believed that telling a story is the key to everything, right? It's the key to how, the best ways that human beings communicate to one another is through story, through allegory, through anecdote. And everybody is trying to connect with somebody and trying to hook in with somebody and telling a story. I'm sorry, I'm in the basement and the kids are walking around. Sorry. But everybody's trying to tell a story. And that doesn't change whether you're working on a movie or whether you're trying to sell software or whether you're trying to explain how software works. Now, I think, they both can learn from each other in a lot of respects. But I think the main thing that I've been able to get across and translating in my career is like really showing the software industry, like you don't have to tell the story in a really boring and dry way. Because the tendency, I think, in a corporate world and a tendency in the software world, which can be the driest of dry, is it's a talking head and somebody's going, our KPIs were dependent on the synergy that we had with the design and the UX of, just like all these buzzwords that everybody in the industry knows, but it's like boring and honestly, who gives a shit? I don't give a shit. I want to know what the story is. How did this change your life? How did this make a difference in your life or the lives of somebody else? And I tell this story all the time is we were doing a customer reference video about EAM. This was maybe like 6 or 7 years ago. And at the time, the Hook and Loop video team was kind of like this unknown nth factor and people weren't understanding what we're trying to do. And we were treating customer reference videos like news stories, like very compelling news stories. And a lot of the sales executives and a lot of salespeople were like, what are you doing? We want to hear about the KPIs and the percentages and this and that, and the other thing. And I told them, nobody cares about that. Like even your customers that you think are going to care about that because they want to know those numbers, they can get that when they dig in and they talk to you and they look at your white papers. But when they're watching a video, they don't care about that. We're competing for their eyeballs. So if we're competing for the eyeballs, we need to tell a good story, a compelling story. But, we do phone interviews prior to we going out and filming somebody. And the customer's talking about how, we've been able to make some strides because of EAM, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, when was the moment that you realized that EAM was going to work? Which was not a question that the sales executives wanted us to ask. But I asked it anyway. And the guy's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, how did you know? Like, when were you sold? And we were like, yeah, we're going to keep this. And this is really going to save us money. He's like, oh, that's kind of a cool question. So what happened was we were going through one of the records and I realized that one of the machines that we have these big like blowers that kind of clean out pipes and kind of help clean the water. And one of the machines was running at something like, $1,500 less an hour than the rest of the machines. And I drilled into the EAM and found out that one machine was on a hybrid oil. So the hybrid oil was making it so that machine was more efficient. And they found out that was happening because of EAM. Mm-hmm. So they switched all those machines to the hybrid oil, and it saved the taxpayers of Des Moines something like $2.5 million a year. And that story is like, that's the story. It's maybe dry to the layman, but like for us was like, well, that's gold.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't have seen that savings unless you were using our software. And that's exactly what we want to tell people.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Right? And that's
that's amazing.
Yeah, the story is the key.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the storytelling, the story, and the why and the purpose, right? So I keep coming back on that. It's very good.
Do you think that other customers could identify with that once? Because as you were saying that, I was like, you know what, you're right. It's that feeling that you want to get, no matter what you're talking about. Because ultimately, we're talking about sales here, right? Like you want to have a connection and a feeling. So, of course, in my opinion, I don't want to know about KPIs. I want to know how these new Apple AirPods can influence me and how I can have a connection and feeling. But in that one that you just mentioned, it was a connection and feeling to that one customer. Is then what you're kind of selling and messaging is that others can have these similar connections, not necessarily that one. I'm just curious.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is like, I think this is something that, people from an agency world or people from a B2C world or like filmmakers in general or people that make television, they know that. If I'm competing for your attention span, I'm competing for your time because I want to basically download some information into you. Whatever that information is, that Thanos is bad or that you need the software to make your life better. The only way to get people to pay attention is to hook them and to tell the story that they want to hear, and a story that's going to be clear enough for everyone to hear and understand. I mean, that's why, you have blockbusters as opposed to like, what's the Departed? It's a great movie, but it's not a box office success because not a lot of people are going to get it or understand it unless you're American. You understand the mobsters and the cops. Like there's a lot of things that you may not get out of it. But Star Wars is universal and a huge blockbuster success because everyone can watch that globally and go, okay, those guys are the bad guys. Those are the good guys. Here's the story. These are the people I like. These are the people I identify with. And the story is this. So, okay, the Empire is bad. Right. It's as old as human beings sitting around a fire and telling a story. The best way to tell a story is with embellishment and somewhere to get them hooked.
Yeah. So you ever hear or see the company up in Detroit called Chinola? They make watches and other leather goods and everything.
It sounds familiar. I don't know them, but it sounds familiar.
The reason why they come up in my mind right now is because the Fossil Watch company, right? Fossil watches and everything.
Yeah. Fossil,
So the CEO basically ducked out of there. I'm probably not going to retell this story properly, but I think it was Fossil. The CEO ducked out of there, laid low for a couple of years, and then bought up the rights to Chinola, which was an old company back in Detroit back in the 1800s. They stopped existing for 100 years. He bought up the rights to the name and then started manufacturing watches up in Detroit and sold this story about this heritage breed of like watches and leather goods. And they started creating all these videos talking about, kind of appealing to that sensibility of like, you're buying American, you're buying really, really authentic, well-made watches. And it's been this sort of, gem in the rough. And it's this Detroit story. Like Detroit isn't dying. Detroit is flourishing, and out of the smoldering ruins of the city, there's this niche manufacturing industry that appeals to so many different parts of people wanting to buy American, revitalize a city, buy these handcrafted goods instead of buying mass market, anything that you can find there. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's all the marketing and all the collateral that they generate and the storytelling that they're doing. Because when you really dig into it, it's a guy, a former watch executive, bought the rights to a name and then created the story. It's not like this was just sitting there up in Detroit, but like he built this entire world and then expose that into the market. And a lot of what you're saying right now, I think that's why they're so successful, number one. But like, it's transitive. It's not just software. It's not just like
Right.
movies and everything.
It's everything.
Right?
We crave, I think, human beings in general, we crave story. I mean, and this is one of the things that I think is really interesting, and as an artist and knowing tons of artists and people, there's a reason that we should be putting more money towards the arts. And there's a reason I think we should stop calling it STEM and start calling it STEAM. Science, technology, electronics, art, and math. Because art is the one thing that all human beings seek at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to think about my 9-to-5 job. I don't want to think about software development. I don't want to think about this. I just want to watch TV, or I want to just look at some photos on Instagram, or I want to go to the ballet, or I want to listen to opera, or I want to just listen to some music. Those are things that are transitive, like you said, Mike, that everybody is seeking, and should be a part of, like all of these things I don't see as separate. Like Rick and I have talked about this before. I don't see technology and art as different. Like, I think that this is going to be like kind of a tangent, but like drones, Rick and I have talked about drones a lot, but like some of the best manufactured drones are also the most beautiful, right? They're designed in a beautiful way. It's like cars too. And Nunzio talked about this in his podcast. He works on cars because there's an inherent art to it. There's a beauty to it, but it's also that, what I was going back to, that creative problem solving. It's a machine and it's art at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what you guys do, like, that's what I think. You guys are artists. I mean, everybody is creative in that sense. You guys are artists. You guys create software. You design and develop software. And that, intrinsically, there's an art to that.
Yeah.
I've never understood the language of coding. I've never understood, but it's a language. It's just like, writing a piece of software is like writing a book.
Or painting painting something,
Or a painting.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You actually just defined, I think, Peter, when we first talked about wanting to do this we've been wanting to do this one on creativity for a while. But you said something to me about, hey, I want to talk about everyone is creative. You may just not know it. And I think you just hit the nail on the head as far as, everyone at the end of the day is seeking that feeling or that art. So in essence, that just you wanting to seek that sort of thing makes you somewhat of an artist, right? And maybe that's too abstract, but I think I think it's starting to makes a little more sense to me, because that's exactly why we wanted to do this show. This show, it's about technology, because we all work in technology, but we haven't really talked about technology today. But I can tell you, I think I speak for everyone in this group. This is like easily one of the top things I look forward to each week, because it's fun. It gives you that feeling. It's just like this friendship and camaraderie and just open discussion that is so much better than like the day-to-day stuff. But that gets back to that. It's because we all want to be creative, whether you know it or not.
You mean it? It's a cooking class?
Yes.
But it also, I truly inherently believe that's also going to make what you do better, right? Like, I already know that Massimo's a badass when it comes to developing software, but this kind of thing is going to like it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, like that kind of the thing that separates us from like an AI is our ability to grab something from the abstract and apply it to something that we're doing to solve a problem creatively, right?
Wait,
that's the biggest.
Shameless plug. This is where Peter came up with the name of the show, Capturing the Intangibles.
No, I didn't come up with it. That was Nunzio.
Oh, it was Nunzio.
It was Nunzio.
Right. But it was all.
I had another one.
What was that other one?
What was the
I
other
wanted
one?
Digital Alchemy.
Yeah.
I like the alchemy.
Which is an alchemy.
Yeah, I like the alchemy.
Alchemy is also an art as well, right? One thing that I want to share to you guys, what I'm seeing even in the Netherlands or in Europe, but 10, 20 years ago, I did my, elementary school and high school in Italy. And even if I did a more...
No, you didn't.
Yes, and even if I did, and my university in Holland, but in Europe and specifically in Italy, even if you do a mathematical, type of computer science type of study, they put you on. I did 4 years of philosophy, 6 years of Latin, right? So all kind of arts or human oriented type of
Humanities,
yes,
yeah.
because they want people to be an engineer, but also understand what life is and what the arts is, and really appreciate that type of things, right? So, and that's very important to be an all-rounder person and be a good person. You could be a very good engineer, but you need to also understand and really appreciate art, beauty. And if you do that, then you appreciate even your own work, because software is something very abstract. It doesn't feel like a phone, nice phone from Apple, or a mouse. It's something it doesn't even wear. It's not a Gucci or Louis Vuitton things, and so you need to really appreciate it, software, and you appreciate it if you understand the other side. So I like to be.
Yeah.
Now, if I look back when I was younger, I didn't understand that why do I need to learn all these things? I just want to do computer science. But now I really appreciate that I have that all-rounder education as well.
Well, so my wife just told me this story yesterday. I guess it was on the news, which I'm kind of trying to stay away from right now. To me, I almost wish that we would take that mindset even a lot more serious here in the States. But I found it so fascinating and almost touching when you hear about, I think it was in Germany, that now if you're a freelance artist, as a part of like their bailout program with COVID and everything going on right now, when you apply, you immediately get a 5,000 euro check to help you through this time, but it's specific to the arts, right? That's so important. And I feel like that sort of appreciation for the intangibles and that sort of thing. I just wish we could do more of that. And just having this discussion with you guys makes me feel even more.
But I mean, it's kind of like, I think that's the one thing that human beings that we continually do that it aggravates me, is that we always forget our history, right? If you look at our history in general, like you like point back to some of the greatest minds throughout time, and they've all been part scientist, part artist.
Leonardo.
Which group is Ted?
You know what I mean?
Which group does Ted Lasso fall into?
Both.
Got it.
Yeah. He doesn't fall into either because it's a fictitious character, Mike. Come on.
Sorry, Peter. I thought it was a documentary.
He's not real.
No, but like, huh? He's not real. Like Da Vinci or Newton or like even Marie Curie, or like a lot of these, the people that changed our world inherently just by doing a simple thing. They relied heavily on the arts as much as they relied on their science or their technology. Edison, Tesla.
I think Steve Jobs as well. He had the technical side, but then really
Steve Jobs as well.
The art side, right? So that's really the same.
Yeah, he was a designer.
Exactly.
I mean, like him and Johnny Ives, like the crazy stuff they did together.
No, absolutely. That's really good. And one thing, by the way, for the audience, if you go to on the Info website or YouTube channels, the InfoOS, all the videos that you see, Peter and the team did it, and it's really fantastic. And back on the story that it was
well, it's my team. I gotta plug. It's my team. I have an amazing team of artists that I work with.
Yeah.
They're phenomenal.
That's what I'm saying, Peter and the team, right? And the funny thing, when we start with the first part, he was talking about the storytelling and the story. He's always like, Massimo, what's your story? It's always this like, I want to hear the story, And I say, oh my God, this guy again, he wants to hear the story. So I try to pitch his story, and they say, no, that's not a good story. You have a better story for sure. So that's challenging of what's your story. I really have, appreciated from him to say, hey, Massimo, you have that story, but you have to tell it, right? So from the beginning, if you work with Peter, he's going to challenging you to come with a story, and then you see the result, because then you have a good story, good video footage, and good quality, and then it shows up in the result. And I always really appreciated, what kind of cool things we have done with Peter and the team.
By the way, I will say that, Massimo, I don't know if you even realize this, but now I'm just thinking back whenever we go, meet in like a dev office somewhere, a lot of times you'll be sitting there for a few hours and you're looking at like UI design mockups or how's this process going. You're like, All right, but what's the story here? And I don't even know if like you actually hear yourself saying it, but that's how you kind of compartmentalize, like, like.
My life is complete.
But no,
Yeah,
that's
why
honestly like
are
how
we doing?
you actually, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, that's that's everybody's ultimate goal. Like, how do we make, like, everybody's had those like epiphany moments. Like, oh man, this works. And where and when do those moments happen? When you least expect it, when you're the most clear mind, when you have kind of a beginner's mind going on, and you're at your most creative, right? And the best ideas also come from the most unlikely place, and it's usually when you're in a creative mindset. And that goes for whether you're writing software or you're painting a picture or you're taking a photograph. They're all happy accidents. I guarantee that 95% of the best software that's ever been written has been a happy accident.
Some of the ideas I woke up and said, I just dreamt about it. It was an happy accident.
Yeah.
Well, we know you're a beautiful mind, Massimo. We get it. But to your point, Peter, do you remember last time back before COVID, when it was me, you, and Nunzio? We went out for dinner after work. It's those types of engagements
I was
that we
not
get
there.
to do.
I was not there.
Nah, we
You weren't
excluded
invited.
you that time.
Oh.
We excluded
You were invited.
Probably went to some
You-
Chinese
you-
food and not Italian.
I can't remember actually where we went.
I think we
but
ate Italian.
Oh.
I think it was the
Oh.
best, the best in New York.
Oh.
Yeah.
But it's those types of environments, you're right, Peter, that it's outside of work that in really just bullshitting conversations that you come up with new ways of doing this, right? Like new ideas, new concepts that, I mean, it's not necessarily the office thing is so tactical. That's why I miss you guys so much. And I'm hoping we get to a point to where we can start traveling and see each other, because that's the intangibles that you want in your organization.
Exactly.
That when you can have this appreciation for people and the art in that, and the art and the creativity that you get in just these organic conversations. I miss that. And we're getting to do it here, and this is an outlet for us to do that. But I don't know. It's just so true.
Well, and that's one of the things too that, like, I think I as 2020 goes along, I think we've all agreed that it's been like a really trying year.
Shitty is the right word, but okay.
Yeah, shitty is the right word. But at the same time, like, I see a lot of opportunities on the horizon. And it's not only this idea of like creativity and artistry. Oh, he went on to the next one, the Maranello, the test track hat.
Now we've got wardrobe changes in this show.
Really? Yeah, that's true.
Just don't take your shirt off, please. For the
No,
love of God.
No, please do. I want to see that.
He's got a big Ronaldo tattoo right on his upper chest.
I'm not like Nunzio with all the air here, so.
Now I lost my train of thought. No, that I think one of the things I see on the horizon is this idea of like not only the idea of creativity, but also the idea of like inclusion of thought, right? Like this idea of like everything has kind of come from this funnel of concept and idea, and kind of like and it's a very humanitarian way of looking at things, and it's a very, dare I say, liberal way of looking at things, where you bring in everybody's thoughts and voices and say, here's a problem, here's an idea, how do we attack it creatively, and actually listen to all those voices and come up with some amazing ideas. It's kind of the same concept as that tangential thinking of coming from, like us being able to grab an abstract thought and apply it to something that we're thinking about critically, but in a collective way.
Yeah.
Things like SpaceX have been able to use that kind of mentality. Apple has been using that kind of mentality, and it's accelerating our growth as a species, I think, in a lot of ways.
If you look at Peter, where we worked almost a year ago, we sat down a week in New York with Nunzio and a team, and we really came with the concept of the new portal, right, for our software. And now we're working on it, and I saw the first materialization this week, and with Rick and Nunzio and the other guys, and wow, it feels so good that you work together on that concept, and we were sitting together and working together. Now it comes in the software. That part satisfied me a lot, that it's just not the software, but how it was created, the creative process, the working together, being on a whiteboard and really drawing all these concepts. They say, no, this is not good, wipe it out, retry it again, and then come to something like, this is really what we want and why we want it and the purpose. And then seeing now coming the software, it's amazing. It's really, truly amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, and that process too is not just it's not, we keep thinking, I think we had a tendency in the past to look at those things as like this is the process of development, and this is the process, this kind of scientific kind of clunky way of doing things, and instead of looking at it as like a creative process.
Yeah.
Like, that whiteboarding is, I mean, you're literally drawing something on a board.
Exactly.
That is inherently in itself an act of art.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Yep.
I'm kind of curious, how do you map this for your team into actually building out that team that reflects that sort of culture then? So like, are you going out to universities and hiring young people? Or are you hiring from industry? Like, how are you actually, like, I get everything that you're saying. How do you build a team around everything that you're talking about, especially for the software industry? But I guess it could be like automobile manufacturing, right?
So surprisingly, with my team, it's been kind of the opposite. I've never hired anybody from inside the software industry or anything around that. It's all people that have worked in film and TV.
Oh, wow.
It's all storytellers or documentarians, which is the same thing. It's just telling stories in the real world, that kind of thing. Like, they're all amazing artists in their own right. And they're amazing storytellers in their own right. And it's kind of interesting. We've had a very storied existence. My team has probably had the least amount of attrition in 7 years out of anybody in Infor, probably. So I've the same 10 people we've been working together for the last 7 years, and it's all, we didn't know, none of us knew anything about software. When I came in, I knew nothing about software, nothing about enterprise software, even less so, right? Just knowing that, hey, we know how to tell a good story. We can learn about the other shit later. And now I think scarily enough, and not to be arrogant, but I think I know more about Infor software than most of our salespeople. I mean, I do, because I've talked to customers.
Yeah.
I know all of the different types of software we sell. I know what kind of customers are using them.
The actual meaning, right?
Exactly.
Like,
I know the meaning
actual
and
feeling.
And purpose.
Yeah.
Right.
And the purpose, and what works and what doesn't, and what we should be getting away from and what we aren't, and what we should be.
It's interesting to round out that from where we kind of started on this podcast is I actually think, Peter, and maybe this is just a theory of mine, but even if you look at, okay, maybe not developers, but call it pure technologists or in the software industry, I think we're even going to see more just creators, because just to touch on the technology for a moment, and I'm curious how this is happening in your industry specifically too, Peter, is I think technology is getting so progressive and to the point to where it's giving more outlets to express that creativity. So if I apply it to what we do, when you think of things like low, no code technology, right, that we do within our stuff, who's to say, an artist from off the street that's got zero experience in enterprise software development can't create something that the entire world's going to love, right?
Right.
That's exactly where we're going. So software companies like Infor, like anyone, I believe there's going to be so much value in looking for those true artists to have a different perspective, because the technology is getting so good that it's less about how it's done. It's just you go and create.
Right. And it's weird. I don't know why, but when you told me that, when you were saying that, I kind of went to like chefs, and there's always been this, we've always in the world had this idea of that, Italian cooking, French cooking, those are the epitome of the best food that you can get in the world.
Italian better than French.
Sorry, Masa.
Italian better than French. We talk.
But they're both bullshit. So
but if you learn the history in the Renaissance, Florence sent some cooking guys to
Jesus, here we go.
France to teach them.
But let's actually look at the history of it. Like, where did tomatoes come from? They're not from Europe. They're from Mexico. Where did pasta come from? It's from China. So let's back up from that.
We made it just better.
Okay. Um, we'll agree to disagree. Anyway, where I was going with that is like, you know, in the 80s and 90s, these upstart chefs started appearing and making gourmet food that like Michelin started giving stars to, and the French chefs and the Italian chefs were like, no, you can't do that. You can't give them Michelin stars. You can't do this is not fine cooking. This is not gourmet cuisine. And now where we are today is upstart chefs come from all over the world making things that nobody would have ever imagined that would have been considered gourmet cuisine. And without a lot of them without formal training. You know, that's kind of we can apply that to almost every single industry. If we look at, you know, it doesn't matter necessarily where you come from, and these old monolithic ways of creating things or these structures that people have put forth, they're not going to stop somebody who's truly creative. And that person that comes into something with beginner's mind and says, I see a problem. What if we would have solved it like this? And then they actually have the dedication and the passion to actually solve the problem. They can do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they actually go forth and do, like Elon Musk is a perfect example. I mean, the guy's kind of crazy, but like, you know, he was like, you know what? We should all go to space. Why did we stop going to space? Let's go to space. I'm going to make a space program. And everybody's like, this guy's crazy. And he's done it.
Yeah.
And he's a smart guy. He's a technologist. He's been able to do things. But a lot of it is just balls and perseverance, right? And being creative.
Yeah, and the question I had in the first podcast, I don't know if you listened, you know, why is that Elon Musk with Tesla, they had to create an electric car, and why is it the established industries, the Ford and the Opel and the Volkswagen, didn't do it? Why they're stuck in whatever they were doing? Why it had to be someone else doing it? What is this that these companies are stuck with? They don't have the creativity or the guts to do it?
I think there's another unfortunate human trait that we have is a lot of people don't want to rock the boat. They're afraid of change. They're afraid of instability. They're afraid of being outside of their comfort zone. I think most human beings to some degree have that. And the creators, the ones that I call creators or creative problem solvers are the ones that know that that's actually the best place to be. The best place to be is to be uncomfortable and going into a new, exploring a new place that you weren't expecting to, and knowing that it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, when we appeal to, then this is going to be me, you know, kind of waxing poetic about being very liberal. When we appeal to our better angels as human beings, of saying, I believe the best in people, and I believe that in hope, and I believe in things can work out, and I don't think that most people are inherently bad, and that we can move forward and go in this positive way. I think that opens doors to being able to do things like that. You know, the car example is an interesting one because cars, since the time of Ford, are so inherently tied to the combustion engine. I mean, you know, in the time of Ford, they were making combustion engines that didn't rely on fossil fuels. You could have a wood-burning car if you wanted to. It's just inefficient, right? But fossil fuels became very efficient. But people had invented electric cars. There were electric cars that were invented in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. People were doing it. But, you know, there was a power paradigm in there too. People not appealing to the better angels. The fossil fuel industry came in and said, wait, I have, you know, trillions of dollars on the line. If people are not driving cars that use fossil fuels, I'm out of business. So I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. And there's documented cases of, you know, here we go into conspiracy theory territory, but there are documented cases of fossil fuel companies and car companies buying up patents of electric cars or hydroelectric cars that run on water.
To block it.
They buy up the patents and they crush them.
Yeah, to block it.
Because their people are not appealing to the better angels of humanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And guys, I'm sitting here thinking about this, and it's been in the back of our minds. I know we all have this exact same goal, and we're very passionate about it. But look, this is by no means anywhere close to like a salesy podcast or anything like that whatsoever. But I don't actually, if I think about the future of Infor and where I would like to see us be and where we go, it's not really known as like a software company per se. Software is something we do. It's not who we are. But ultimately, where we keep going, because we even struggle because we work in kind of, call it the high tech, the more developer centric tools, right, Peter? But so we always struggle with getting that message out. But I think more so than anything, I want Infor to be the company that we are the enablers of creativity, right? That's what I want us to be known as. So the things that we do, the things that we
That's
develop,
pretty awesome.
I want it to be that, you do not have to be an IT admin to do all these things, because there's so much creativity that Joe over here might have, a better way of executing this piece of work that no one's ever thought about before. And why do we make it hard for them, right? So that, I don't know, that's just what I'm pretty passionate about as our future. And I think we have a great core.
And you should be afraid of it even, right? So
Right,
like he was saying,
right.
Peter was saying, probably people were afraid of change and afraid of other things. So we have an environment and a culture that we are innovative and we are not afraid to change and do it, right? So absolutely.
And that's one of the hardest things. I mean, that kind of cultural shift of people being, afraid of rocking the boat or trying to change the status quo. I mean, I think as human beings, not just necessarily in the software space or the film space or whatever, any like industry that you're in, we have got to kind of make it open so people are not afraid to take chances.
Yeah,
right.
To innovate, to do something different or new.
Right. Why do we have to mimic another company? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
You hear that a lot. Like, everyone strives to be someone else that's in this mold. Like, okay, yeah, there's market research, and go to an MBA school and they're going to tell you, hey, look at the past. It's the best predictor of future, right? I get that. But that's not what's going to make you great.
If you
right?
want to
and
be,
so
you want to be like another company, just go and work for that company, right? So, I mean, you have to be different.
Yeah, but you know what? The other advantage that Peter said about his chef story, by the way, like, I think there's something important there, because the thing is, like, back then, like, I don't know if you ever look at those old school chef restaurants, Parisian chef restaurants, where you order some sort of duck and they have this big silver, like, they twist the duck around and everything like that and squeeze out the juice and then make a gravy for you right there. And now I think, like, Peter, I think you were thinking about that Japanese street vendor that got the Michelin star, right?
Yeah, one of them. Yeah.
So the other part of this is, well, now I can drop buzzwords, right? The synergies driven through democratization of like there's like pedigree doesn't matter anymore. You don't have to have a history of being able to do this, because the tools and the ideas are so open and accessible to an entire population, like the entire planet, that actually you're not stuck in perpetuating the same ideas over and over and over again. You have that freedom and flexibility to branch out and kind of invest in those new types of design ideas, or like you're not beholden to, like, back in the 50s and 60s, there was IBM and no one else, right? Like, you do it the IBM way or you don't do it at all, and you figure out some other way of doing it. Now you've got YouTube tutorials, you've got whatever the hell you want to make and build and create and everything. Like, pedigree doesn't count for anything anymore.
I think that this is going to also cause a huge culture clash. Mm-hmm. Like, we're trying to decide as a species what we want to be. I always think about Ray Kurzweil's and all the futurists, their idea of the singularity in 2048. Like, what's that going to be? Where are we going to land? That I don't know if you guys know about the singularity and what that means, and the human paradigm shift. What's that going to be? But, like, we're at a crossroads as a species. Do we want to be tribal? Or do we want to be together? Do we want to be low tech, or do we want to be high tech? Do we want to be high impact, or do we want to be low impact? I mean that, like, by the environment. Do we want to be democratic, or do we want to be authoritarian? Mm-hmm. And I think that we're going to have a clash. And I think that clash is going to come creatively with technology as well, because I think that just through human history, we've seen that when those two things, when democracy and authoritarianism kind of rub up against each other in every space, there is a conflict there, which also makes for a great story. But there's a conflict there where, like, those in power we could talk from the software space, IBM, Microsoft, Apple, Oracle, SAP. They don't necessarily want to accept that paradigm shift or facilitate that paradigm shift, the democratization of software, but it's going to happen whether they want it to or not, unless they can seize power completely. And so I think that's what we're as a species going to have to make a decision over those things, right? Whether we want to just continue to innovate. It's like, do we want to go to space? Do we want to save the planet? Do we want to do these things? If we don't, here are the consequences. If we do, here are the consequences. And that's a very, I think an interesting way to look at it. Like the things that I'm talking about this and the things that you were just speaking to, Mike, that democratization or that kind of belief in everybody should be able to solve problems. Let's go to the future. Let's innovate. Let's constantly innovate. Let's see where this takes us is inherently going to clash with a lot of the power structures we have in place. But that's also kind of cool.
Yeah.
So Gannon for 2024, huh?
Yeah.
First president to give the
in.
horns.
We're going to vote.
I'm in.
Hey, I do have a question before we're closing to Peter that I have many times. Peter, for the people on the audience, also helped a lot leading our, execution for our Inforum, which is our conferences. The keynotes, the videos, making sure that everything goes very well. I always had this question for you, Peter. When the show runs, right? What is your biggest fear of failure? What could really for you be a disaster happening that you can correct in that moment? Nunzio is on stage or myself or an executive, and then something happens. What that will be that something happens that makes, oh my goodness, this is a disaster?
That's a really good question, Massimo.
What is the biggest fear that you have that, as long as this is not happening, I'm good?
That I missed something that will cause a big problem. Once everybody's once you're on stage, Massimo, or Rick's on stage and you're talking, 99% of everything that I've done is probably already out of my hands, and everything is buttoned up, and it's in God's hands. I can't do anything at that point. But a power outage, that would be a big one. Everything I do relies on electricity, which is kind of funny. Or something that we did, we missed something. Usually the things when somebody's on stage or we're making a video, the things that are cringeworthy to me are that was misspelled or the grammar is wrong in some text, which are really ridiculous things to be stressed about or worried about. But, those are the things I worry about. But, a perfect example would be when we had Inforum a few years ago and Serena Williams was on stage.
Yep.
And
I remember that.
And we had hired this news reporter, Maurice Dubois. Venus Williams, I'm sorry.
That was
right.
Venus. Yeah.
And Maurice Dubois was up there, and he was a third, if you know who he is, he's a newscaster, had previously been on Chicago television and also had moved to national television, I think with NBC. He was in New York, I'm sorry. He came on to do the interview, and we told him, hey, this is 10 minutes. Here are the questions, and please don't go over. And nice guy, don't want to cast any aspersions on him, but he also was doing this because he wanted to have some exposure with Venus. So he went way over, and I was kind of ready to let him go over, but some of our higher up, some of our executives, names I won't name, were livid and freaking out and screaming at me, get him off the stage, play him off, put some music on. I'm I can't do that. And I was getting screamed at to get it done, and we did it and pulled him off stage, kind of in a very gentle way. And that was probably my most agita moment that I had in one of those kind of events.
Yeah,
those kind of things that are out of my control. Yeah,
I remember that because actually just before Nunzio, myself, and Rick presented, and we were sitting on the front row. So I remember that moment absolutely.
I also
So,
remember.
You remember when you botched our handshake hug that turned into something really ugly?
He told me to hug,
Massimo,
and then I did the handshake.
it was the exact opposite, and he just forgot.
You
So
know,
that's
the
fine.
funny-
it was
the
pretty funny.
funniest-
Those sort of things are funny, and then like it happens in a moment. But like it's just the thing that just like kind of drags, where it's like a slow moving car wreck. That's the stuff that kind of stresses me out. I mean,
But you know what? That, but by the way, I just want to say, like, that was day 2, wasn't it? That was like that was day 2.
Second day, yeah.
Every single software conference out there, like, it's an open secret. It's not even a secret, right? Like, people just start getting up from their seats and they're like meandering around, and they're gonna find something else. Like, every single butt was glued in that seat for the entirety of that interview. And because you kept it going, like, people were really, really super psyched about that entire process. Like, for as upset as people were about that, that was probably one of the more memorable conference events, more so than Flowrida. And that's
for Mike, Flowride is the top.
yeah.
We'll close on this because as you were saying that, I couldn't help but have the analogy in my mind. This is how I know that you're like, I love you to death, but you are an utmost professional at your profession, because all I could think about as you were saying that is that you're not actually worried while it's going on. And you know why? It's just like a professional athlete, or you talk to Bill Belichick or any of these coaches, they know, hey, it's this simple. I've prepared to do X, Y, and Z. And as I do that, I know it's going to be fine. Why would I worry? Right.
Mm-hmm.
But that takes a special person that has done their job to just such a high level, and I commend you for that. And you're awesome at what you do.
Thank
I'm
you.
so glad you were able to come join us. You're one of my favorite people, Peter. I hope
You guys too.
really know that.
You guys too.
Yeah.
We'll have you back on again soon, no doubt.
Thank you very much, Peter, for being here. And I'll watch the show. My promise.
Ted Lasso, come on.
Yeah.
Let's
Yes,
go,
Ted
Massimo.
Lasso.
We're gonna start calling Massimo Lasso.
Massimo Lasso.
There you go.
I'll do that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.